I've seen the topic of BoJack Horseman resurfacing, whether he is deserving of pity, atonement, or anger. Some people want to know why people even like him. I think he's liked as a character, but not necessarily a person. A lot of us empathize with BoJack because he is relatable. We recognize aspects of ourselves in him: depression, loneliness, self-hatred, and even laziness. But on a rational level, he has done some messed up things. More specifically, the audience can relate to at least one bad thing BoJack has done and felt bad about. Obviously, there are the less relatable ones, like attempting to sleep with a friend's teenage daughter or abandoning someone to die. However, people can relate to addiction, being a bad friend, worrying that they aren't worthy of success, regretting life choices, depression, being awful in relationships, you name it. I believe that we see those moments in BoJack and recognize ourselves in him, which is why people enjoy him. However, I don't believe the average fan idolizes him because the writers do a great job at consistently portraying his wrongdoings as wrong. The show doesn't let anyone off the hook for their terrible actions, but it's impossible to see him suffer throughout and try to be better and not root for him to find peace in the end. His relatability is shown in examples like his internal monologue in the POS episode. Throughout the episode, BoJack fails to complete tasks or achieve goals while hating himself for it. That is how a lot of us feel, especially in today's time. Some people can also relate to certain aspects of BoJack's past, an abusive father and mother. One of my favorite episodes of the show is the one in where BoJack speaks at his mother's funeral. He spoke to many people who have had abusive relationships with family members. That episode really captures the complicated emotions that come with having an abusive parent. You despise them and how they have hurt you, but a small part of you wishes or hoped they would change. You can also identify with some of BoJack's goals. He mainly desires two things. He wants to be happy and remembered. Today, people do all kinds of things to get to fame. I also believe people can empathize with him because he does make some progress, even though many of his gains are lost. And he only makes significant progress near the end. He becomes somewhat less toxic, more thoughtful, and happier. I believe that gives people hope. It's not easy to forgive a BoJack Horseman. We watch him change for the better, only to revert back to his old self the second he receives the praise or attention he desires. Like Todd said, I get that he's a complicated, emotionally wounded human being, but it doesn't make his horrific actions any less terrible. But I believe that even the most horrible individuals can become better versions of themselves, and is the reason why people will keep rooting for BoJack. Forgiveness is not necessary or even desirable for everyone. However, he should continue to push himself to be better, just for his own sake. We witness his efforts to improve himself throughout the show, and we see how his trauma and old habits ultimately become his downfall. His good intentions are completely misguided, and his bad deeds are greatly exaggerated. If he messes up badly and tries to apologize, he is either ignored or unable to put his pride aside to do it honestly. We hoped BoJack would improve, to succeed and overcome his demons, and for his friends to forgive him, even though he never put in the effort necessary to change, because he found it too easy to fall into bad habits and a negative mindset. Too many of his actions, such as ruining Todd's opera or getting a minor drunk, and then leaving her at the hospital with her boyfriend, do not merit forgiveness, and him allowing Sarah Lynn to die of an overdose after sending her on a wild drug binge was unforgivable. But I believe it is critical to take into account that BoJack's trauma is still significant. It is not, however, an excuse in the broadest sense. Despite the show's heavy focus on self-forgiveness, it's important to remember that doing so does not eliminate the consequences of your actions, contrary to what the last episode may have led you to believe. One of the show's major themes is learning to accept and move on from the past, even if it's only a fleeting moment in the bigger picture of your life. I saw someone say, hating someone is drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. There is no inherent deep meaning or purpose to trauma, and trying to find one can sometimes lead to more suffering, as the show portrays it in an uncomfortable but important truth. Because of this, even though they hate it, characters like BoJack and Diane can't help but think about their terrible childhoods. Maybe they were a bad kid who deserved harsh treatment, or they were a prodigy who was misunderstood and underestimated in an attempt to make sense of their terrible experiences. The characters' self-destructive beliefs keep them mired in a vicious cycle of abuse. It is difficult to accept that their parents' abuse had nothing to do with their childhood and was probably the product of their parents' imperfections and baggage. That doesn't mean people shouldn't or can't attempt to make something positive out of their traumatic experiences. It just means it shouldn't hinder their growth as individuals. For this reason, I don't think we could ever genuinely hate BoJack, His upbringing by monsters makes me feel terrible for him, even though he does some horrible things. I can't even begin to fathom the difficulty he had in finding peace and healing on his own. His mother constantly drilled into his head the ideas that he was useless, a failure, and unlovable, yet many question his self-hatred. Concern for BoJack in the episode. The view from halfway down was palpable, even more so when he was all by himself, miserable, and weighed down by regret. The news that he had survived and was able to make up for lost time during his year-long prison stint brought a lot of us relief. We felt bad for BoJack's challenges and limitations, but the road life had set for him was essential to his development. He suffered the loss numerous relationships, in addition to a substantial sum of money and his lavish mansion, which he had a history of abusing. The takedown interview that Biscuits Braxby conducted had a devastating effect on his reputation. When Angela Diaz offered him a payout in return for signing a contract permanently divorcing him from horsing around, it was a threat to his acting ego. BoJack fueled his substance abuse with his wealth and social connections. He covered up his feelings of hollowness and low self-esteem with his inflated ego and his reputation, which allowed him to continue engaging in his destructive behaviors. The loss of these possessions compelled him to adapt to a new way of living. Even though he did a lot of good for his friends, he also did a lot of bad, and I like the writers for not villainizing them for leaving him. I loved following his recovery process and seeing how he was learning, but I also thought it helped that his friends left him. Some people, even after expressing remorse for their wrongdoings, still continue to cause pain to others and themselves. The show's refusal to blame anyone else for his departure was one of my favorite parts. But let me know what you think. Do you believe any continued hate towards BoJack is warranted? Do you understand why people love him? Comment down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe on your way, and turn on post notifications so that you get notified when another video is posted. Thanks for watching.